Our next speaker, give you a little bit of a different perspective, is Hugo Bonar. Hugo is in charge of the investigative unit, in fact, established the investigative unit for the Irish Medicines Board. Hugo has been tremendously active in the EU, leading a number of efforts to refine and to look at and to assess the legal structures, the legal status within the EU, principally working with the Council of Europe. He is an attorney. Previously served as a senior Army officer in the Irish Defence Forces. Hugo's a close friend and associate, and it's been my pleasure to work with him for about 8 years now. If you join me in welcoming Hugo Bonar.
Thank you, Tom. I'm here partly because Tom asked me to come and make a presentation. My chief executive thought I should come here because Scott came to Ireland in June. I was asked to attend the breakfast meeting and make a presentation, but of course I went to Jerusalem with the Permanent Forum on International Pharmaceutical Crime with Tom, where we had a much better time. And I left it to our Minister for Health to actually make a speech. And she made a very good speech in favour of the patient, and she's a great advocate of the patient. So it was, I suppose, very political for us to say yes to this invitation. But more so, we feel we have a responsibility to try and share what we have been doing with the wider world. We try to do so through other fora, but this is an opportunity to do so here. And personally, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation and facilitating it. I'm very happy to be here because I will pick up something from this, and I already have picked up something. So even for all of you people that will have heard some of this before, hopefully you'll pick up something new. There are a lot of people here who have heard a lot of this stuff this morning before, but we all pick up something vital that we can take away with this. That's one of the reasons why I'm very happy to be here. So I hope that I can be a contortionist and actually get around doing this. What I'm going to talk about today is just a few of the initiatives that are going on within Europe at the moment, and I'll show you two maps because not that I think that you don't know where Europe is, but I'll show you that we have more than one Europe. But I'm primarily going to talk about the European Union and Council of Europe initiatives, and you can see here, and I'll explain it as I go along. So we'll start with the European Union. And there's 27 member states, and this is not about geography or politics. You'll see it when we come to the Council of Europe that is actually different. This is an intergovernmental body. It's very much like a government and behaves like a government. So it does make laws. So in 2008, it decided to change its laws in relation to pharmaceutical medicines. And this was in relation to three particular aspects, only one of them that I'll cover here. One is pharmacovigilance, which is of great importance to people here, but we want to talk about the counterfeit medicines particularly. And the pharmacovigilance aspect of the amending directive to the pharmaceutical medicines directive, known as the pharma package, is going well. The second aspect was information to patients. That's not going quite so well because the Commission and the Parliament and the Member States haven't quite agreed. The Member States do not believe in direct advertisement to the public, something that is quite common here in the States, but that's not something that happens in Europe. It's practitioner-driven rather than patient demand. So that's a little bit slower. The third element relates to falsified medicines. That's what they call it. It's counterfeit medicines. That's the real issue, but it's called falsified medicines. So in relation to falsified medicines, the issue that we're talking about are really focused on safety, the wholesalers and the manufacturers. And in relation to the wholesalers, or the safety issues, we're really talking about what security measures should be mandated by law to go on product. And that's a difficult one because can you really tell a manufacturer what technology he should use? Because the day you legislate for it, it's out of date. That's the difficulty. We all appreciate that. So they got around it a different way by saying there will be certain guidelines that will be put down, or rather law will be put down, that you will have to have certain safety measures put in place prior to your product going on the market. The question arises, and the guidelines put in for this will relate to a risk management issue, whether it will be all prescription-only medicines or indeed all medicines, or whether it will be only the originator's medicines, or whether it should include the generic medicines, or only those that have a history of being counterfeited, or of such high value that they're very attractive, or perhaps can create such a danger to the public health if they are counterfeited. So it's quite complex. But at the end of the day, the focus is to get packaging with security measures on them that can be checked by the pharmacist, the community pharmacist, the person who's actually going to dispense this. And we heard earlier this morning about we need to have somebody being able to check this at the point of dispensing, and that's the pharmacist. The second aspect relates to wholesalers, and not all wholesalers or people who deal with wholesale trade in the EU are actually regulated. The ordinary wholesaler that handles product, buys and sells, is regulated, but what about the brokers and the traders? And that's a problem all around the world. They are trading in medicines, but nobody knows who they are half the time. They never touch the product, they make a profit, and they stand back from the situation. And we do know that counterfeit medicines is transacted through that field. This legislation will make it mandatory for traders and brokers to be identified if they're operating within your territory. Even if they're not transacting within your territory, they must notify their presence and their address within the EU to the competent authority in that state. So there's a lot of activity to happen there. And of course, the manufacturers, there are a couple of issues there that we need to tighten up the rules in relation to manufacturing to ensure that there's total consistency between member states carrying out inspections. And in relation to import and export, that is particularly interesting to all of us, because we know that product leaves one end of the world, comes through the EU because of logistical arrangements, and then goes on to a third country. Now, should that product actually be stopped within the EU? Should we check it? And there lies the dilemma, because on one hand, it's got nothing to do with us. It's not going to come onto our territory. Why should we care? On the other one, what happens if it's stored overnight in a bonded warehouse, or indeed tampered with while in that bonded warehouse? Or if somebody happens to notice this is actually a counterfeit product, do you say it's got nothing to do with this? So it's not a simple matter of saying, well, according to customs legislation, you can't touch goods in transit. So the EU is actually addressing this issue to make the system a little bit more secure for the citizens within the EU, and more secure for the country that's actually receiving the product, even though we are not directly responsible for that country. In relation to active pharmaceutical ingredients, we all have heard the problems this morning. So what do we do about it? Well, within the EU, the legislation currently requires that it's the finished dosage product manufacturer that's responsible for ensuring the quality of the API. That's not actually going to change. What will change is that the EU will have a list of countries that have standards and enforcement at the level of the EU. And once it is satisfied with those standards, those countries go on a list and manufacturers can buy from those countries. If they're not one of those countries, then those countries can make an application to the EU to be actually listed on the basis that they have come and can guarantee those standards, and those are inspectable. So that we're getting closer to having a better system, and rather than constantly enforcing the issue by saying we don't want this and keep it outside our borders, perhaps the better approach, which probably is this approach, is why not try and raise the standards to the standard that we actually want? So legislation is not just about beating down the bad guy, it's actually trying to raise the standards and eliminate the bad guy because it's no longer profitable. So in conclusion, really, in relation to this issue, we can say that perhaps the pharma package, we've gone too far, the pharma package can identify falsified product more easily. That's our aim. And we want to ensure a better quality of ingredients. We want to focus on the packaging primarily, because that is what people can more easily identify. You have to do a lot of chemical analysis, as you just heard, to actually identify the actual product. But if you can step back from that and identify it earlier, it's much cheaper, better use of resources, and much quicker. And of course, the last line, of course, of defence, which should always be the first line of defence, can we keep it out of the EU? Now, that sounds very good, and we do that with our customs people. But the reality is, what do we do with it when we keep it out of the EU? Do we allow it to go somewhere else? So we can't allow that to happen either. The next initiative that I'm going to go into in relation to, going backwards here again, in relation to the EU, it's not actually an EU Commission issue. It's the heads of medicines agency that have their own group of all the medicines agencies within the EU, have established a working group of enforcement officers. So that's all 27 member states, plus Switzerland, plus Norway, Liechtenstein and Iceland, all getting together at least twice a year and working throughout the year to actually identify issues in relation to enforcement to attack the issue of counterfeit and illegal medicines getting into the system and what we're going to do about it. Not such an easy task, but this was set up in Ireland in 2004 because we identified that we're all working very hard in our own countries, but are we coordinated? And that was the whole point in having this initiative. And you can see that we have 5 working groups, starting with counterfeits. And what we try to do is and we're trying to do at the moment, been working on it for a while, is to draft some kind of an assessment procedure where we can actually identify the prospect of a counterfeit product being counterfeited before it happens, so that we can take action. And a very good example of that was when Tamiflu, when we were all rushing to get it and we knew it was going to be counterfeited, what action could we actually take to minimize the prospect of counterfeit medicines, this counterfeit medicine actually getting on the EU market? And not that much actually got onto the market because all of the countries coordinated their actions to identify the bad guys, to identify the bad product, to actually stop it before it actually happened. Now, there are a lot of other factors well beyond us that actually helped us, but it's nice to see that the system works. In internet threats, we're looking at ways of actually tackling that issue. It's almost a problem that you can't actually tackle, but there's nothing that's insurmountable, and we're actually finding solutions to that. And with the wholesale and distribution, which is not really an enforcement type of committee, well, we decided to have this particular committee because we discovered with the GDP inspections going on that everybody follows a pro forma. So if you fulfill the pro forma, you fulfill your inspection, you get a good result. But enforcement people tend to go in the side door and see everything totally different, and where all the flaws are, where the gaps are in legislation. That's what our input was, so that we could actually provide the advice for the changes both to the inspectors and to the European Commission, who also sat as a member of our group to take away and perhaps populate the pharma package that I just spoke about. So the system is a joined-up system to actually get action on a number of fronts. Rather than duplicating, we're working together. I'll move on to the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe is a different body to the European Commission, and you can see it's much, much larger and goes right into Russia. And Russia is a member of this. People mentioned Russia earlier on. And there are 47 member states, not 27. This is a body that actually focuses very much on standard setting. And when we talk about standard setting, we're talking about the rule of law. We're talking about many other issues. So we really have to focus on this with a view to see how matters can be improved. So we set up a convention. Well, it's nearly finished at the moment. It's in draft form, should be signed off either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. It's really taken 3 years to develop. That's very, very fast. And you can see the whole focus here is a criminal law convention to focus to protect public health. And it is there to protect the victim, which is very important, and to promote international cooperation. Cooperation is great, but if you don't pass meaningful information, it's not much use. And of course, it covers medicines and medical devices, not just one or the other, and that's quite challenging. The offences, we specifically put in offences, and if we're to say we have achieved anything in particular, is to get one offence for counterfeit medical products, to cover medicines, medical devices, that will be standard throughout all 47 member states. Now, the one thing about this convention is not confined just to the 47 member states. This can be signed up to by any country worldwide, as many of the Council of Europe conventions really are.